everyone, I'm going to be reading you some stories from Let's Not Meet, and it's basically a subreddit full of creepy stories where somebody's been stalked. And this one is called Chased Through Satansville by a Possible Cult Member, and it's by bmongan1104. In Pennsylvania, right near the border into Delaware, there is a narrow, eerie place with deformed trees, closed-off paths, and lots of legends. It is formerly known as Devil's Road. The main attraction in a place called Satansville, which encompasses the whole of dark twists, isolated roads, and unsettling encounters. It was written about in a book, Weird Pennsylvania, which highlights the creepy places of the state. According to many rumors, there is a cult house hidden in the woods surrounding the road, and any trespassers on the road, especially those who stop, will be chased out with a black or white SUV or truck. For years I had read about the place and heard spine-chilling stories until I couldn't stop thinking about seeing it for myself. My friend Matt and I spent almost every Friday night at the mall together, as teenagers do. As expected, it can get pretty boring pretty fast, especially with no money to actually have a motive to shop around for anything other than disappointment. Visiting Satansville without telling our parents became another weekly tradition of sorts, after he told me about his experience a month before our visit. He told me that when he visited with his guy friends, his phone service completely cut out, leaving them without Google Maps in a potentially dangerous, unclear area that was already scarcely mapped. Soon after, he told me, a black truck came off a dirt road and followed closely behind them until they found the main road. It wasn't much, but it was enough for me to be hooked. Not too much happened on our first few trips. We would see other cars rarely, as it's a hidden road that is no longer marked due to excessive theft as the street sign. Occasionally, the cars would be black in colour, and we would get a rush of adrenaline. It was fun, but not exactly terrifying, until one night. We finished up at the mall around 6, and we left with enough time to circle around once or twice with daylight and the remainder of time in the dark. It was about a 40-minute drive to Satansville from the mall, and I was tingling with excitement. According to the legends, cars that visit frequently are more likely to have experiences at this place, and this would be our third time visiting in the last few weeks. Instead of Matt and I going alone this time, we brought our friend Lola, who was very outgoing and would likely have a sense of humour in a situation we'd be too scared to continue in normally. We drove down the highway and finally made the first turn leading to the seclusion. Matt and I had pinpointed several areas where we thought the cult house may be, but stopping on the road is illegal, so we'd never had a real chance to explore. At least that's the logical reason I give in lieu of us being major cowards. The ambience immediately changed as we entered Satansville, and the cool night air fled in through the cracked windows. In the first few turns, other people aren't entirely a rare sight, a few trucks pulling out of driveways, the like. However, the turn in onto Devil's Road never loses its wow factor. The trees on both sides of the narrow road lean away from the forest aggressively, not just a tilt, but completely bending in the trunk away from things we could only imagine. We were approaching the first major bend in the road, and a car was coming up towards us. It was a tight squeeze, nearly impossible for two opposing vehicles to pass. The presence of a car alone was enough to cause a twinge in my gut. Matt was focused on squeezing by while turning, and Lola was busy cracking jokes to see what I saw, but I have never forgotten the face since then. I looked over to the white Jeep on my left, and the window was incredibly tinted but half down. Looking back at me, straight into my eyes, he'd been looking at me long before I looked at him. It was a young man, maybe about 25, with long blonde hair, a deathly pale face, and a horribly thin fingers on the steering wheel. He was not at all focused on driving, as his eyes pierced me, and this is the worst part. His neck was completely turned towards me, while the rest of his body was completely straight forward. This may not sound creepy, but it was not normal to bend that way. He said something, but I couldn't hear him over Lola and Matt laughing at her antics. I couldn't break his gaze. I was stuck staring at him until finally Matt passed the bend and he was gone. I kept checking the rearview mirrors, terrified with a feeling I'd never quite felt before. When I could no longer see the Jeep, though it felt as though he could still see me, I quietly asked my friends if they'd seen him. Neither of them had looked at him nor felt anything unusual. I was pretty unsettled, yet excited to see what else would happen. We turned off Devil's Road, but were still in Satansville, preparing to loop back around, when we passed a little shack that always housed two black trucks. There was no sign of any other drivers, and we wanted to stir the pot a little. We stopped for a few moments and honked the horn, flashed our blinkers, then kept driving. We also blasted Old Town Road for some reason, because that was our peak of comedy at the time. We looped back around, and were back on Devil's Road when Matt stopped mid-sentence to adjust his mirror. In the darkening distance was a black truck. We giggled with nervous excitement and kept driving. It was exciting, but it kept a reasonable distance, and I think we all kind of assumed it was a coincidence. That is, until we turned off Devil's Road once more and saw that there were no trucks parked by the shack anymore. We lost the truck when we turned on the main road circle back round again. We circled around 2 more times, nervous but sceptical, and not much happened other than a butt-riding white SUV that kept blinking its headlights. Not gonna lie, that freaked us out. And the return of one truck to the shack. This is where it gets really intense. On our 5th loop, we were all really tense. The aura had changed to heavy, and it was completely dark at this point. Things had started to feel more ominous, probably from the slightly less passive actions taken towards us by whoever was there. We went down the bends, peering nervously into the woods. Some trees were marked with 666s and upside-down crosses, marks of other, more ballsy teenagers, and there was a distant light in the woods, courtesy of God knows what. As we turned off Devil's Road, but still in the heart of Satansville, headlights appeared behind us. It was impossible to tell what kind of car it was, as it was pitch black, and we just turned the first major bend. Moments later, the truck appeared behind us, speeding. We were only going about 25, and the truck must have floored it to catch up, and it drove uncomfortably close to us. I was the one to see it first. It was a black truck, windows tinted and driver unknown. We drove on for a minute, freaking out and turning completely behind us like a creepy Jeep guy, but more normal. Soon a second truck joined behind it at a fork in the road, and they revved their engines as if in communication. The truck sped up, nearly crashing into us, and we were forced to speed up. This continued through many intense twists and turns, where our speed reached up to 70 at the maximum. They flashed their lights, kept speeding up and getting closer. At this point we were losing our crap. They were definitely either going to run us off the road or catch us and do God knows what. They had these weird red lights on the tops of their trucks, and the light was reflecting off every window in our tiny Honda. Just above a small hill, the main road was visible. Relief flooded us. We panicked again, though, when we realised we would have to wait for traffic to slow before we could turn, and they would definitely catch us. With nothing else to do, we stopped and glanced behind us. The trucks were gone. We all expected a sudden ambush, and made the turn onto the highway and started home, talking about what the F had just happened. We came to the conclusion that the trucks had probably turned onto a dirt road only visible to those who know it's there, and that they were chasing us away from their activities like the rumours say. What were they doing exactly? We have no idea, and we have no intention of finding out, as we haven't been back there since. I still can't get the face and presence of the man in the Jeep out of my head, and this was over a year ago now. So, creepy Jeep guy and potential cult leaders, let's not meet ever. This is my first post, and although this happened back in December 2019, I still think about it on a daily basis because it was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. I hope it offers some sort of enlightenment on what to do / what not to do if you find yourself in a similar situation. Back in early December, I had ventured out to do a bit of late-night shopping. I'm a 31-year-old stay-at-home mother of two young children, so once my husband gets home from work, I like to take some time to myself to go shopping, take a drive, or run errands, kid-free. It was around 8:30 p.m. when I arrived at the Target I frequent. I'm by no means a paranoid or anxious individual, but I have attended several seminars in college on human trafficking and have done plenty of research on my own, learning to identify red flags and what precautions to take out when in public alone, especially at night. I carry several self-defense items on my person at all times: caboot and alarm and universal handcuff key, just in case. I parked directly in front of the store, next to a cart caddy, and took a mental note of the vehicles parked nearby again, just as precautions. I was taught at an early age to always be observant of your surroundings, and being a control freak naturally makes you that way. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary that night, and the parking lot was actually quite empty, most likely because it was a weekday. As I entered the store, I began browsing like normal, following the natural flow of the store departments, following the main aisle around. I had been browsing for only 10 to 15 minutes when I noticed a young gentleman, mid-20s. He was tall, skinny, dressed in a dirty grey two-piece sweatshirt and brown work boots. He looked over at me. I smiled and said hello, but his facial expression was blank. He looked like he may have been high on something by the look in his eyes, but he didn't seem to care for my gesture and quickly moved on. At first glance, there was nothing in particular that alarmed me about him, except I took notice at the fact that he was just wandering down the main aisle with no cart or basket, hands in his pockets, and didn't seem to be with anyone. I continued shopping with no second thoughts, and made my way to the next department. Several minutes had passed, and that's when I noticed a second young gentleman, wearing the same grey sweatshirt and similar pair of work boots. Again, no cart, no basket. He too glanced at me, then quickly darted his eyes away when he realised I was looking directly at him. I became a bit more alerted, but still remained composed and continued on browsing. Another 15 minutes or so passed, and that's when a third older gentleman caught my attention. And you guessed it. Same grey sweatshirt and work boots with no cart, no basket, just his hands in his pockets. I assumed they were in some sort of work uniform, maybe construction workers. But why weren't they walking around together? And why didn't they have any items to purchase? At this point, it was difficult to focus on browsing. I had a bad feeling about these three men, and it became clear that something was a bit off. Over the next 20 minutes or so, I felt as if I was being monitored by the three of them, as if they were all communicating my whereabouts as I continued to make my way through the store. Because each department I entered, it didn't take me long to notice one of the three men pass by whatever side aisle I happened to be in, making their presence known to me. I stayed completely vigilant while trying not to panic or allow my suspicions to overwhelm me. Something about their presence felt very heavy and dark, so I decided to test their intentions, to prove I wasn't overthinking the situation, and my bad gut feeling was valid. I began picking random aisles and travelling back and forth between departments in a very unorganised and random fashion to see if the men would continue to pass by me as frequently as they had been. With every aisle I popped into, it was just a few minutes later one of them would make an appearance, staring me down as they passed by. It felt as if I was being surrounded by a wild animal, hunted even. They were no longer trying to be conspicuous, which was the scariest part of all of it. And everything instinctual was screaming at me to get out of there. I gripped my cart so tightly and figured if they got too close, I could use my cart to push them away, or at least create distance between us. By this point, I had been shopping for about an hour altogether, maybe a bit over, and was ready to purchase my items. And honestly, I felt too uncomfortable to continue browsing even if I wanted to. The men had been following me all that time, and I was becoming more annoyed if anything. The store was pretty empty around this time, one of the main reasons I like shopping at night. But that made this particular situation even more unsettling. Two preteen girls were wandering around by themselves, which quickly caught my attention because the men had bypassed them, making similar advances, but the girls were seemingly oblivious. So I quietly got their attention and asked them to go find their parents and stay with them, trying not to freak them out. The mother in me was on full protection mode. I couldn't imagine having my young children with me on this night. Thank God they were home safe and sound. As I made my way to the checkout, I noticed one of the men was coming up from behind me, walking at a quicker pace this time, so I immediately stopped and turned to lock eyes with him as he approached. I will never forget the darkness in his eyes. An eerie smirk formed on his face as he nudged my shoulder, continuing to stare me down, walking backwards to hold his sinister gaze as he exited out of the store. I had lost sight of the other two men, and I hated the uncertainty of it all. He made his message clear in that very moment. My stomach dropped, and my entire body began to shake. It was a feeling I hadn't felt since I was a kid getting lost in the supermarket. A feeling of desperation. I quickly walked to the checkout, discreetly asked the cashier if I could speak to a manager, and told them what had transpired over the last hour, politely asking for a male employee to walk me to my car, and for them to alert their security team member. When I told the manager what happened, his face sunk, as if he had already known about these men. And once I described them, she confirmed she knew who I was talking about. She expressed that several of the female employees had found the men unsettling in the past, and reassured me that someone would escort me to my car. She made a report about the incident, and said she would alert the authorities. I was still shaking, but felt relieved that she believed me and showed concern for the other young female patrons in the store. She took my information, then a young male employee walked me out to my car. What I saw as I exited the store made me so sick to my stomach, solidifying all of my suspicions. A white windowless van was parked in the lot directly behind my car, about a 3 parking space distance between us. One of the men seated in the driver's seat, and the other two leaning against the side of the van facing my car, attempting to hide out of view. I saw how cliche and obvious can you be? Your license plate might as well read Lady Snatchers at that point. Whatever their intent, it didn't seem pure. I pointed them out to the male employee and said, "There they are," which then prompted the men to scurry into the van and speed out of the parking lot without hesitation. I truly don't know what would have happened if I walked out to my car alone, and I'm so freaking grateful I made it home safe and sound and lived to tell my story. Over the past week, I had heard there were several abduction attempts in the shopping centre parallel to that target, and I'm almost certain it was the same individuals. To the 3 matching sweatsuit creeps. Honestly, I never hear anyone talk about it seriously, but living in small towns seems to make people cruel. Maybe it's just the sheer boredom that brings out the worst in people. Anyway, this is my first time posting here, so please bear with me. I grew up in a rural Texas town with a crippling meth problem. No positive outlets for people to do activities, like a movie theatre or park, and we didn't even have a large grocery store to just hang out in. The teens mostly just ended up drinking, driving, and going to bonfires, but quite a few of the teenage boys in my neighbourhood decided that being evil was the best way to have fun. They would literally go out of their way while driving to swerve and try to scare younger kids riding bikes, or poison loose dogs, and even set fire to a few of the trailers in my neighbourhood while people were still in them. Only one arrest was ever made in connection to the arsons, but it had definitely been a group activity. My neighbourhood was a trailer park, in which each trailer was placed on a few acres of land, and at least some forested area between each plot of property. The road was an older dirt road, with gravel and rocks poured over the dirt, which is what I had to learn to ride a bike on. It was difficult. One day, when I was around 10, 15 years ago, I was doing my best to ride the bike on this rock road without falling while riding away from my house, when I saw my older sister, who was about 16 at the time, sprinting along the side of the road towards me from the opposite direction. I was going very slow, trying to keep my balance, but decided to get off the bike when I noticed how panicked my sister looked. I saw a cloud of dust coming from the road, but a fairly large hill was blocking the view of my sister and I from any vehicles that were coming towards us. When my sister got to me, she grabbed my arm so hard that I winced in pain, and she pulled me away from the bike. By this time, the truck that was producing the dust trail was just coming over the hill, but it was fairly far away, so I don't think they noticed us. There are woods around 10 feet off both sides of the road where I was, and my sister was pulling me into the woods on the left side of the road. I complied, but was asking her what was happening. She just told me to hurry. We made it about 30 feet into the woods when my sister dropped to the ground and pulled me with her. She covered my mouth and told me to be quiet. I complied. I saw that the vehicle she was worried about was a black truck filled with 5 guys that were in their late teens or very early 20s. The truck screeched to a stop right where my bike was. I froze solid when I heard my sister whisper, "Crap." 3 of these guys got out of the car, but didn't say anything. It was clear that they were looking very intensely into the woods on both sides of the road. Luckily, for some reason I am not sure of, they all lined up and started approaching and walking into the woods on the opposite side of the road. They were talking, but we couldn't make out what they were saying. I was worried that they were going to take their time looking for us, since only a handful of people lived this far down the road, and it could have taken hours before another car would pass through. It took about 5 minutes of perfect stillness and silence before one did, though. One of the guys had literally placed my bike on the back of the truck when they noticed another car coming over the hill behind them. They quickly jumped in the truck and sped off. We waited there probably 10 more minutes before we stood up and started to walk back home, although we walked right along the tree line instead of on the road itself, just in case. My sister didn't say much to me, but told my mum when we got home that one of the boys that she'd been hanging out with was talking about wanting to kill some of the annoying kids in the neighbourhood, and she assumed that it was that it was a good bet that one of these annoying kids might end up being one of her 3 younger siblings. It could have been any of us, but I was the one that wanted to go ride my bike alone that day instead of playing video games with my 2 brothers. She decided to head home when none other than the guys decided to go against the guy talking about wanting to kill kids, or even jokingly escalate his desire to kill annoying kids with more details. She had been running home and just got enough of a head start before the boys hopped into their truck to stop whatever they might have done. The cops were informed, but apparently the boys disagreed, and a parent claimed they never left the trailer, so nothing ever came of it. I knew 2 of the boys' names because we lived in the same neighbourhood in a small town, and I know they never got less evil. They later invited my sister to a bonfire party that everyone was going to be at, but my sister decided not to go when she asked all of her friends how the party was. Literally no one knew about it. That is because she was the only one invited. She stayed away from them ever since. Unfortunately, neither of us still live there. Of the 2 that I knew, one is currently incarcerated for several drug-related offences, but the other one is still out there. As for the other 3 that were in the truck, I have no idea where they are or what they are up to. So to the garbage boys in the truck, you can keep my bike because I hope we never meet again. As a child, think kindergarten age, I loved to talk. If anyone had a question for me, I would gleefully give them way too much information. Most people found it endearing and would praise me for being so smart, which encouraged me a lot. My mum and I normally shopped at the market just a few minutes away from our house. My mum had been shopping there for some 20 years at that point, and was friends with most of the workers, so I was friendly with them too, and was always happy to talk with them. Whenever my mum got distracted talking to someone, I, with the attention span of a 6-year-old, would wander around the aisle. My mum would keep an eye on me to make sure I didn't get too far, but if she was distracted, one of the employees would usually be around and gently guide me back over. One day, though, we went to a different market that I couldn't remember having been to before, and we didn't go back for nearly a decade. We were walking around the aisles when my mum ran into her friend. They began talking, and I, not really realizing that I no longer had a store full of adults keeping an eye on me, started wandering around the aisle. My eyes caught some colourful display, I think flowers or balloons or something, and went over to look. Once I was satisfied with my inspection, I turned back to the aisle only to find my mum wasn't there. That had never happened before. I looked around a little, though not moving from my spot near the colourful displays. Since it was right near the registers, there was a decent amount of people nearby, which I'm thankful for now. As I was looking around, an employee came up to me. He was older than my sister, she was 12 or 13 at the time, and younger than my dad, in his mid-40s. That was the only way that I could tell age. Now, I would say that he was probably in his early to mid-20s, if I remember right. "Hi there," he said sweetly, in a tone that you normally speak to kids in. I cheerily said hello, actually stepping a little closer. "Are you looking for your mummy?" I say yes, happily explaining that I had last seen her talking to her friend, and that I could normally find her easily when I wandered away, so I wasn't sure where she could have gone. "Does she leave you alone often?" "Not really. My sister was normally with me and my mum, if she wasn't. She was 12 or 13, and she was super mature, so if my mum had to leave for a little bit, she knew I'd be okay, and she never left us alone in public, just at home if she needed to run somewhere. Never for very long, just the length of the time of a Pokemon episode or something. And my dad was at work a lot, so he didn't come back until late, usually. Just if you were wondering." "Where do you live?" "Well, wouldn't you know? I just learned my address. We just learned how to mail a letter in school, even took a little class trip to the mailbox on our school corner to send them out. I knew how to write my address now, and I knew how to say it. Want to hear? Of course you do. I know kids who are naive, but I was downright dumb. I was diagnosed with dutal colour blindness 2 years later, otherwise known as red-green colour blindness. Makes sense, as I was totally blind to all the red flags. "Where do you go to school? Who picks you up?" "Well, I go to the local elementary school. I don't know the address though, sorry, but I know what street it's on, because I wait on the sidewalk for my mum or daycare sitter, depending on the day. So I see the street sign a lot, since I'm usually waiting for a while to be grabbed." "Do you like animals? Like puppies?" "Dogs scare me. Cats scare me. Pigeons scare me. Fish scare me. Flies scare me. You know what doesn't scare me? Turtles. I have 5 turtles. No dogs that might bark if someone drops by the house, like our neighbour does. Those dogs are always behind the gate, though, so they don't scare me a lot." It had been a few minutes since I last saw my mum. Even with how much information I was dumping, I was a very fast talker, but I was starting to get a little antsy. Not because I was uncomfortable talking to a stranger, but because I had skipped lunch that day specifically to con my mum into letting me get a bagel from the store next door, which is why we were at the market in the first place. My mum was holding on to the bagel to make sure I didn't try to eat it too fast and choke, which I had done several times in the past. I wanted my bagel, and while I liked talking to this grown man who made me feel smart and was oh so interested in my life, I liked bagels more. Plus, if I caught my mum when we were near the bakery section, I might be able to use my charm and cuteness to get a cookie. So I gotta find my mum now. "Oh well, I'll walk around with you to help you find her. You want to lead me through the market you work out where you can easily bring me to the back room, meat locker, or any number of places?" "Yeah, sounds good. Ozzy." I look around to see my mum, the relieved look on her face slowly changing into something more anxious. I smile happily and wave her over. She immediately grabs my hand, and I can tell she wants to chide me, probably for leaving the aisle, but she seems more occupied on the man in front of me. Before I can even open my mouth to introduce him, or remember that I never even got his name, he quickly says he's glad I found my mum, and he needs to get back to work, and practically runs to the back of the store. My mum puts her hands on my shoulders and looks me in the eye. Her expression a lot more worried now. "What was he talking to you about?" she asks. her voice more serious than I'd ever heard her. "Can I have my bagel?" My mum opens her mouth, pauses, and goes into her purse to hand me my bagel. Between bites, I happily tell her about the conversation and everything I remembered. My age and grade, pickup schedule, likes and dislikes, my literal address. My mum gradually became paler, then became red with anger. She brought me over to the manager and I don't remember much about the conversation. I got a cookie, I remember that pretty well. It was shaped like a watermelon, which was apparently far more important to me than paying attention to what was being said. The police weren't called. We went home and my mum told me I wasn't allowed to walk around the store anymore. No more talking to any stranger, even if they worked at the store we were at, unless she was with me. If I ever saw that man again, I was to run away, find someone I know and ask for help. If all else fails, scream at the top of my lungs, just like when a fly lands on me. God, insects are creepy. I agree pleasantly, not really fazed by anything she's saying. I know that some people are bad, but bad people look bad, right? They talk mean and look scary to try and grab you. This guy didn't, so he wasn't bad, was he? But if my mum was saying it, then I'd listen. And I'd better enjoy that cookie, because we weren't going back to that store ever again. Tears incoming. In exchange, I can get a donut once a month from my usual store. Tears cancelled. When I was about 12, our school had a safety assembly and was talking about the shady things adults do to get close to kids, and a very, very watered down version of what they most likely wanted. And I'm sitting there, listening, and suddenly realise, oh, if my mum hadn't found me, something bad might have happened. If not in the store, then in front of my school. And if not in front of my school, then my house. A little over a decade later, I'm 18 now, and I've never seen the guy again. Let's keep it that way. First things first, English isn't my first language or second, so excuse any mistakes, and I'm on mobile, apologies. This happened in the summer of 2017. I was 19, my abusive dad died earlier that year, so I had the freedom I had been longing for after living my teen years locked in the house. I had a sum of money stashed away, so I wanted to treat myself. So that summer I made plans with my two best friends and another girl that stood us up later. I'll call my best friends S, male, and A, female. We decided on a road trip to a beautiful city in the south of the country. I was driving them, as I'm the only one with a car. Dad's car. If he knew I drove it, he would have died twice, lol. It was a long trip, more than 600 kilometers, but it was worth it. We spent the first couple days swimming in the pool of the hotel, or the beautiful beach, and doing fun stuff at night, because the weather was cooler. The fourth day, as it was decided before coming, to go to this famous valley which was around 25 kilometers outside of the city. None of us have ever been there, but we knew about it from friends. How beautiful it is out there, and how fun to jump off the cliff to the beautiful blue water. We also decided to camp there that night, as it had a campground. On the way to the valley, every few minutes there were mini ponds and the same river water. Some had a lot of families, some were empty. We got to the valley and there were a lot of cars. We asked around and were told that the cliff is a 45-minute hike and we should leave the car in the parking lot. We didn't know that, so we weren't prepared for a hike. We just had our sandals and it was hot as heck. We decided to return to those ponds and just enjoy the day. We found an empty one and it had a mini cliff to jump from. It was our own little paradise, palm trees, another huge cliff that echoes our woos. There was a guy in the front kiosk there, I'll call him K. He was around our age. We said hello to him and he welcomed us. He was a nice dude, and it was a slow day for him, so we brought lemonades just to help him out with some money. We asked him to join us if he had nothing else to do. He helped us set up our stuff on the other side of the pond. We swam, played cards, sunbathed, and we got to know him a little better. He lived with his family at the top of the huge cliff before us. We told him about our plan, that we wanted to spend the night, but now he had to drive all the way back again before sun is down. He told us that he'll be leaving soon and hitch a ride then then hike at the top for 20 minutes, but we can drive him to his house and welcome to spend the night there. Have a nice homemade meal, and then we all come back here tomorrow and have a great day again. That gave me the idea to camp right where we are. My friends are chill, so they didn't mind my idea. I asked Kay if it was cool and safe, and he said yes. I even asked him to stay with us since we had a spare sleeping bag and all. He said yes, and told us we were nice people. Didn't know the area was dumb as staying there, as it was not guarded or inviting a total stranger to stay for the night, but one of those stupid ideas actually saved our lives. We lit up a campfire, told stories, talked, and joked around until about 12 a.m. when we started to feel tired from all the fun we had today. I wasn't sleepy yet, but I'm sure as heck were tired. S and K were in a tent, and A and I were in the other. I lie there for a while, playing games on my phone. A is sound asleep, then I heard some light footsteps. I thought it was a dog at first, because during the day a lot of them passed by. But then a rock got kicked, and the footsteps stopped, like it was maybe kicked by mistake, and the person just stopped to make sure nobody wakes up. So I thought maybe S or K woke up to pee, and made sure not to wake us. I whispered S's name, no response or steps, and then K's name, same thing. At that point I was freaking out. We didn't even have a signal there, just to text S to make sure if it's him in case he didn't hear me. Then it hit me. We have a total stranger with us, and we just trusted him. All kinds of ideas raced through my head of what we could do, but we calmed a bit as we have S with a huge body and I had some MMA classes. And K was a skinny dude. Even I could take him by myself if I had to. So I decided to confront him. I shined my flashlight to catch him sneaking around, but he wasn't there. Confused, I tried to look for a dog, if it wasn't K. Then heard the friction between a shoe and the ground, and a whisper, and shined my flashlight to that area to see two effing men trying to hide. When they saw me see them, they just came out of hiding, walking towards me, and one of them had a machete. My blood ran cold with bad thoughts of what could happen, and then the guy with the machete said, "Give me everything you've got, or I'll slit your throat." With distance between us and little between me and S's tent, I run to it, waking him up with my yelling, and they start charging towards me in the tent. I see them coming and just booked it, got in the water and swam to the middle of that pond, not knowing what else to do. They knew they can't get in the water, so they focused on S, who just came out with his flashlights too, to see two men standing above him. I yelled in English to S, saying, can he fight them? And he said back in English with the machete in hand, so I'm not sure. The two guys told us to shut up and give him everything we've got. S returned inside the tent. I hear him shuffling stuff. From the water I felt helpless. I'm not sure if they will take everything and leave, or take everything and murder my friends before my eyes, so I had this idea. I noticed people here light up in surprise and delight, and I, a foreign-looking girl, speak their mother tongue, which is a tribal language that I learned from my mother and grandma. I don't know what I wanted to achieve speaking their language, but maybe I wanted to tell them that we are not outsiders and we are a family, brothers and sisters, and we don't do this to family. I told them that we didn't have much and just please don't hurt us. They laughed in surprise, I assume, and spoke back in their language. A girl like you speaks our language? How surprising. We wanted to hurt you, but now we'll just take everything you have and let you be. I guess my idea worked somehow. Also, A apparently heard whatever was going on and didn't come out. S then came back with his phone, a radio and stuff. He had been showing them with a flashlight in his mouth. He apparently told Kay we were getting robbed, and he too came out of the tent ready to give his money. He told me in English again just to come and give them whatever they want so that they can go, which is something he learned for self-defense from whatever. That in a situation like this, where there is a knife, a gun, or whatever, no need to fight. With a miracle, not sure which flashlight was it. Mine that was shaky and lighting random spots every time because I was swimming and trying to not let go of it underwater, or the one S had in his mouth. Kay saw the two men's faces for the first time and recognized the one with the machete. He was like, "Name?" The guys responded, "Who's this?" "It's Kay, my man." "God, what are you doing?" The men said. "What are you doing here?" Kay said. "They're my friends. I met them on the internet and invited them here. Just leave them alone, man." They left everything at my house. The men still wanted something, at least, and Kay just gave them the money he had. The money we bought lemonades with. "Just go," said Kay, sounding frustrated. When they started walking around, I got out of the water shaking, and went to the tent to check on A, who was silently crying with fear, and screamed when I entered the tent, thinking it was whoever was out there. I reassured her that they were gone, grabbed my towel, and came out to see S watching the men leaving, and K sitting on the ground hanging his head. I told him I'd refund his money for saving us. He said no need, and felt that it was his fault because he had said it was safe. I said it was mine because I wanted to stay here. S said it was nobody's fault and just be glad we are safe. I wanted to make light of the matter and teased S on how his MMA classes didn't do crap for us. We laughed, but clearly shaken, and got back to our tents. Apparently none of us slept that night. It was 7 a.m. and I thought I couldn't enjoy that day after what happened last night. I told A that I want to go, and she agreed. Found S and K awake too, and he also agreed to leave. We got out stuff, Kay helped us again, and we exchanged numbers and went on our way to the hotel where we slept the whole day. So Kay, thank you for helping us. We sure enjoyed every moment of that day, but that damn night tainted those memories, and for those men, I hope we never meet again. I'm going to tell you the story of a terrifying old creep that has stalked me since I was 16 years old. I'm currently 20 and female. So basically, to set the scene, I'm an average height, average size 20-year-old female. I've been told I'm very approachable and perhaps too nice to strangers. I sometimes just don't have the heart to tell people to F off, and I definitely should. Obviously, I'm not going to give specific details, but I worked in a restaurant which was inside a bigger shopping centre. My stalker, an old man named Eric, worked for the actual shopping centre itself, and not a store inside it like me. When I was 16 and first started the job, I was quite timid and awkward and let anyone say pretty much anything to me. I didn't know what to say when older customers and other employees would make inappropriate comments to me. I would just simply laugh off whatever people would say or not respond. In my 16-year-old mind, this was a lot easier to handle. I had one other friend at my job who was my age, and her name was Jessica. Jessica had worked there for longer than I had, and one day she asked me if I'd heard of this guy who worked in the shopping centre called Eric. Jessica described Eric as very strange. She didn't describe him as frightening or unsettling, or even someone to be afraid of, just as a very eccentric man. Really, she and other employees would laugh at his odd sayings and awkward behaviour. Jessica has always told me that Eric brought her a present on Valentine's Day, chocolate. Anyone would think that this was friendly behaviour or harmless flirting, if he wasn't a 50-something-year-old man bringing chocolates to a 16-year-old girl he barely knows. I began to see for myself that Eric wasn't just an innocent old man with a slight crush. He had other intentions. The first time I remember seeing Eric approach me was when I was filling up a machine near the entrance of my work. The machine was out of the view of all the other employees, and the restaurant was empty, so this was pretty much the perfect time for a creep to approach without being seen. Eric wasn't supposed to enter the place of my work when he was working at the shopping centre, so he had deliberately gone out of his way to come and speak to me. To describe his appearance, he is your typical creepy old loner. He was gaunt, had grey hair, with bald patches, and had beady little eyes which he never averted from yours, and I can't get them out of my head till this day. Eric must have snuck up on me, as I looked up, and he was standing right next to me, a little too close. I could feel his breath on my cheek. "My name is Lucy." Eric asked me, "Lucy, are you married?" He almost giggled after he said this. He had a smirk on his face, which made me feel as if he was trying to pretend that he thought I was older than I was. And at 16, I looked 16. Eric liked to ask me questions that he already knew the answer to. just to see what my reaction would be, letting me know in his own way that he had been looking up information about me on social media. He would do this frequently. I began to clock onto the fact that Eric had been going a little further than approaching me at work, and instead stalking my social media accounts in the weeks following this first encounter, such as Twitter and Instagram, when he began asking me very specific questions about things I had posted about in the days before. For example, I had posted on Instagram about a tattoo I got, which was in homage to my favourite band. I was serving a customer one day, only to be interrupted by a shrill but quiet voice. It was Eric. His eyes were huge, and he had a look of pure excitement and menace on his face. He had yet again entered my workplace when he wasn't supposed to, just to talk to me. He asked me, "Lucy, what's your favourite insert band song here again?" Eric relished in my discomfort. You could see by my reaction that I was clocking onto the fact that he had been viewing my personal social media, and the thought of that made my blood run cold. I felt disgusting and violated. The tattoo I had gotten was covered by my work uniform, so the only way he could have seen it was by going through my Instagram page. This creeped me out majorly, but somehow I just forced myself to forget all about it and carried on working. Over the course of a few months, Eric would come into my workplace more and more frequently, asking me bizarre questions and still reciting back to me things that I had tweeted about or posted on Instagram. Every time I would see him, I would get visibly uncomfortable, and he liked this. This is what he wanted. All while this was happening, Jessica approached me and let me know that Eric, had followed her in his car on her way home from work, slowing down to ask her where she lived. I had also been told other disturbing news from about Eric from multiple different people. It seemed as if he was becoming more invested in whatever his intentions were towards me and Jessica. News had travelled to one of my managers about Eric's unsettling actions towards me, and this manager informed me that a few years ago Eric was rumoured to have followed a young girl who used to work for our restaurant into a toilet. Things didn't quite make sense to me. He was known for being a creep, yet still employed at the shopping centre. On one hand, I was glad to know I wasn't just creeped out for no reason, but on the other hand, I was frightened, as he'd been doing this for years and yet no one had stopped him. Anyway, there was this woman who worked at the same place as me, called Rebecca, and she had some sort of disability which caused her to befriend and be trusting of people without knowing anything about them. It seems that Eric took advantage of her, as he had asked for her phone number and she gave it to him. Rebecca had shown me texts with Eric. He had texted her things like, "Rebecca, are you alone?" and "Rebecca, are you sat on the bus alone?" But the most unsettling part of it all was the text from Eric that read, "Rebecca, could you please let me know information on the girls that work at the insert restaurant here name?" I was stunned. This was quite slowly turning into my nightmare. I was constantly questioning why this old man was so heck-bent on finding out everything to do with my life. Why me? He had gone out of his way to source information about me through a vulnerable person I worked with, and I was scared he was going to go further. Again, this creeped me out, but still, for some reason, I forgot about it and carried on with my life, which was very hectic at the time. And in a way, I'm grateful that I didn't have time to dwell on Eric's growing obsession. However, this was something I wouldn't be able to ignore forever, as Eric began inserting himself into my life in ways I couldn't ignore or brush off. One night, I was watching the movie Grease with my family, and I must have tweeted something stupid like, "Grease is my favourite film," because it's a great film, right? Anyways, the morning after my tweet, Eric approaches me in his usual way and utters, "Do you like the film Grease, Lucy?" The same usual smirk lit up his face, and the same usual wave of disgust washed over me. He was really making a point to let me know he was watching me. I tried to carry on with my day, but spent the entirety of my shift feeling a little shaken up. To someone reading this story, it may not seem as unsettling to you as it did to me at the time, but when someone is going out of their way to make sure they know information about you, He spent every waking hour thinking about what they plan to do with this information and why they insist on taunting you with this knowledge. The second I clocked out of my work and got into my car, my phone went off. This was a notification for PayPal. I clicked on the notification to see that I had received £3 from an Eric Stanley, and the note attached to it: "To Lucy, Greece is the word, from Eric." He literally found my PayPal account and sent me £3 with a quote from the movie attached to it. If this wasn't crazy enough, in the days following, I had received a string of anonymous calls, incessant calls, one after the other. I was in floods of tears and ended up having a huge panic attack. I felt like there was no escape. My phone rang and rang and rang all night. I had to turn it off to get away. Even when I turned my phone back on, the calls continued, and every time my phone would ring, my head felt like it was being impaled with the sharpest knife in the world. I was on complete edge. The phone calls that I did answer were just someone breathing down the phone, making a point to breathe heavy. I even swear they were trying to sound like they were jerking themselves off, which sickened me. I had no proof that it was Eric, but it wasn't hard to put two and two together. After all the lengths he had gone to in order to track down my personal information. If he had found out about my parents' address, my phone number, and all of my social media accounts, what was stopping him from finding out where I live, breaking in, hurting me or my family? That night I had horrific dreams in which he chased me around my house and taunted me for hours. I still have similar dreams and struggle to sleep without my boyfriend present. As I'm scared he's standing right outside my door to this day. I reported Eric to my managers, and they passed my complaint on to the managers of the shopping centre. At this point, I was genuinely scared for my safety. Multiple girls added to my statement and added details of times they had witnessed Eric's unsettling behaviour or times he had been inappropriate with them too. Eric had been cautioned by the shopping centre's management, yet nothing was done, except the fact that he was warned not to talk to me. Eric found ways around the no talking to Lucy rule. He would make animal noises at me when he would see me, like monkey or a dog or any bizarre noise that would get my attention. I think he just wanted me to think he had outsmarted me, found a way around the rules. After I stopped working at the restaurant as a full-time job and saw Eric less and less, which was obviously great for me, I moved cities as I went away for university and made new friends, which distracted me from my old life in my hometown. I still thought about Eric every now and again, and when I focus on it for too long, I can't be alone out of fear that he is still keeping tabs on me. The thought of that terrifies me. After moving away and starting my new life, I forgot all about the twisted little man who used to obsess over me at my old job. I forgot he existed, but I was soon to remember. On Christmas Day, when I was back home in my hometown with my parents, my phone buzzed, and I expected it to just be another message from a friend or a family member, but I was wrong. I received a notification from PayPal, and it was the exact amount of £3, only not from Eric this time, but a girl whose name I didn't recognise at all. I opened up the PayPal app, only to see a note attached to this payment I had received. The note read, "Sending on behalf of Eric." My blood ran cold, again. I had forgotten all about this man, and all he had done to make me feel unsafe and unsettled. And here he was again, antagonising me, yet this time doing it through other people. Perhaps his way of telling me that him being banned from talking to me himself won't stop him from entering my world. I threw my phone down at the couch and spent the night drinking with family until I forgot about the notification. I probably should have told someone about it, but I just wanted to do as much as I could to block him out. I didn't want him to control me anymore, and since I hadn't seen or heard anything from him, and I wanted to stay him that way. I think Eric still works at the shopping centre and lives local to me. I avoid my old workplace so I don't have to see him, and he doesn't have to see me. So to the creepy, beady-eyed freak that made me live in fear, let's not meet again. Okay, that's the last story for today. Thank you for watching my video, and I will see you next time.